Satan מלפנינו ומאחרינו ובצא כנפיך תסתירנו ופרוס עלינו סוכה שלומך ופרוס עלינו סוכה שלומך
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. Erev Tov. Good to be with you. We are really happy that you're here to bring in Shavuot, to do some learning on this Erev Shavuot. We'll learn more about what that's going to be in just a few minutes. But often do at TBI with a little music just to get the juices flowing, and then we'll make our blessings to bring in the festival, blessings over our festival lights and kiddush. So we will get started, and then we'll give you more information about our evening.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
So, those of you who join us on Shabbat know that on Shabbat we've been lighting, since October 2023, an extra candle on Shabbat for really those people who can't light a candle on Shabbat. Shavuot is a time that, in our personal lives, it's a time that we light Yortzeit candles for people that we've lost in our lives. It's one of the, as we do on Yom Kippur and other festivals and other, and on the Yortzeit of our loved ones' deaths. And so as we light the Yortzeit candle this evening, before we light our candles, we want to bring in our personal losses, of course, that we all carry in our own ways, those personal losses, those people who we remember, and also these larger communal losses, personal losses that are communal to our people, losses in the world of the Jewish people, and then just the huge losses in our world, the devastation and the death and affecting Gazans and in all these other terrible war-torn places in the world, and all the stuff that we carry each and every day. And we continue to pray that wars come to an end, that people get the relief they need, that hostages come home, and we celebrate being together. We were just talking at dinner tonight about the idea that we hold a lot of things at the same time in our world, right? Devastation and loss and pain and joy and celebration and community and all of these other kinds of things, and they live side by side simultaneously. So we're going to light the Yortzeit candle and then our holiday candles, and then we will join in blessing our festival lights. I just see that the air just started again, so these may burn down pretty quickly as they get blown on, but we'll see. No, it's okay. If they burn down quickly, they'll burn down quickly. So. All right. So if it's your custom to rise while we bless candles, I invite you to do so.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel yom tov.
We join in the words of Shehechianu, thanking the Holy One of Blessing for giving us life and sustaining us and allowing us to reach this time.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazaman hazeh.
We also sanctify this day. We recognize the holiness that's part of this day with Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bakar banu mikol am, v'romamanu mikol ashon, v'kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ahava, moadim lesimcha, chagim uzmanim lesason, et yom chag hashavuot hazeh, zman matan toratenu, mikra kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim, kivanu v'acharta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, umoadei kodshecha, besimcha uvsason, hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, v'kadesh Yisrael, v'hazamanim. Chaim.
L'chaim. You may be seated. So just a few words about this evening. If you didn't know already, you now know that it's Erev Shavuot. And it's Zaman Matan Toratenu. It is the time that we stand at Sinai, 50 days after we left Egypt. We stand at Sinai and receive Torah, receive the commandments. And it's also the time, and I'm sure our teacher this evening will share more, but we read from the Book of Ruth. And I'm not going to do more than just say that right now, and I'll let our teacher talk more about that. This evening is sponsored by a number of groups. First and foremost by our Brenda Rosenfeld Scholars Series. Some of you in this room knew Brenda. Brenda was committed to learning and to social justice and art and culture and so much more, was a pillar of this community in so many ways. She would have been organizing evenings like this and did many, many times through the years. And when Brenda died, people donated money in her honor, and we created this Scholar Series. This is actually the second time Rabbi Geller has been with us as part of our Scholar Series. So it's wonderful to welcome you back. We'll learn more about you in a minute. I also want to thank Women of TBI, who are helping to sponsor this evening, and our TBI Brotherhood and Adult Jewish Learning, all joining together to help make this evening possible. And of course, I want to thank all of you. Many of you were here just last night in this room. So it's been a big weekend, a busy weekend, and so I really appreciate that you're here. For those of you who are online, and I see we'll have to distribute our text or go make more because I see some tables don't have text on them, so we'll make sure that everybody has text in a minute. And for those of you online, we'll post a link to the text so you can follow along online if you click on the link to the whole PDF. All right? So I'm now going to turn it over to Diane Schuster, who is going to introduce our teacher for this evening.
Thank you, Rabbi. We are having more copies made, so I'm glad I have a rather long introduction. Usually an introduction begins with the speaker's biography, but I'm not going to start with that. I'm going to talk about the fact that I first encountered Laura Geller in the early 1980s at a women's forum of the Women's Forum of the Federation when we were still in the Eastern region. We were called the Eastern region then. Rabbi Geller startled some of the audience when she spoke about creating new rituals to mark events in women's lives, things like menopause that few of those in the room had ever thought to mark by ceremony. I also studied with Laura at events held by the American Jewish Congress. I recall a women's Seder one year at Stephen S. Wise Congregation, and at Women's Days of Learning at the University of Judaism, where the focus was on changing roles of women. In the 1990s, when I was changing my own roles and beginning my work as a researcher in Jewish education, I recall going on a Saturday morning to a wonderful Torah study session with Rabbi Geller at Temple Emmanuel of Beverly Hills. And in 2002, I was fortunate to be part of a trip she and two rabbinical colleagues led for adult learners at the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. And today on my computer, I came across a transcript of a 2011 interview I did with Rabbi Geller when I was doing some research for the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. In 2015, Jack and I shared a Seder with Laura at the home of mutual friends in Los Angeles, where she told us about her interest in issues of aging and helping Jews in LA to age in place and find mutual support. In 2017, I helped welcome her to as that year's speaker for the Brenda Rosenfeld Scholar Series. In 2020, I heard her speak about Getting Good at Getting Older, the book that's available for your perusal and purchase this evening, which she co-authored with her husband, Richard Siegel, Zikronam Livracha. The book was named a National Jewish Book Award finalist in the category of Contemporary Jewish Life and Practice. And this past fall, again around the table with friends, I heard about Laura's new book, Moments That Matter, Making Transitions in Midlife and Beyond, a book that's coming out within the next few months. So Laura and I have history. And on top of that is her official biography as a major leader in the Jewish community. Here are some of the official details. Rabbi Laura Geller, Rabbi Emerita of Temple Emmanuel of Beverly Hills, was the third woman in the Reform movement to become a rabbi, and the first to be called from a national search to become the senior rabbi at a major metropolitan synagogue. Named one of Newsweek's 50 most influential rabbis in America, and by PBS's Next Avenue as a 2017 influencer in aging. She was a co-founder of High Village LA and is the chair of the Synagogue Village Network. She has served on the corporation board of Brown University, from where she graduated in 1971, and she was on the board of the Jewish Women's Archive. She was featured in the PBS documentary Jewish Americans. She's the author of numerous articles and in books and journals, and was on the editorial board of the Torah, A Woman's Commentary. Most importantly, she is the mother of Joshua and Ilana Goldstein, the stepmother of Andy and Ruth Siegel, the grateful mother-in-law of Janelle Goldstein, Jack Rausnitz, and Will Swanson, and the very proud Savta of Avery, Levi, Phoebe, and Nell. Is that all of them now? And Alice just arrived. Right. There's even more. The most important thing is that she's a wonderful friend at Temple Beth Israel. We are honored to have you with us this evening to talk about, with a little help from our friends, the Book of Ruth as a model for intergenerational bonding and engagement. Rabbi Laura Geller.
If you have to have something added to your resume, there's nothing better than a new grandchild, who today is 9 days old. I just got back from San Francisco, where I had the delicious pleasure of felling. So I have actually titled what we are studying slightly differently from how we originally structured it. Yes, shocking. What I would like to talk about is the story doesn't change, but we do. So, Chag Sameach. As you know, tonight is Erev Shavuot, which is a biblical holiday. It's sort of a biblical holiday. We'll talk a little bit more about how it changed over the generations. Each year, we read as part of Shavuot, Megillat Ruth, the Book of Ruth. You know that if in a traditional Jewish year you read through Tanakh, parasha by parasha, you read a lot of the prophets in the Haftarot, and then you read the scroll, the Megillas, the Megillot, connected to different holidays. And the holiday that is connected to the Book of Ruth is Shavuot. So every year when I read this book, and I must say I love this book, it's 4 chapters, it's very short, we're going to be reading a chunk of it together. It raises different questions for me. And this year, I'm in a Bible study class, and it raised the question, why was this book written? The book is set in the past, as we're going to see. It's set, quote, in the opening verses, in the days when the chieftains ruled, which, according to this setting, was the time of the judges. But it turns out that that's not when the book was written. The book was actually written after the Persian exile in response to Ezra and Nehemiah, the late 6th century, the early 5th century before the Common Era. And those 2 prophets were exclusivist, anti-intermarriage, and focused very much on legal purity. They challenged the idea of intermarriage. Their focus was on rebuilding the temple after the exile, the Persian exile. Whoever wrote the Book of Ruth, we don't know who that was, wrote a brilliant, very intimate family story that was challenging everything that Ezra and Nehemiah stood for. So we read the Book of Ruth for what it is. It's a transgressive text. It's challenging sacred texts of the tradition. It's a story about a family, and at the same time, it's a story about a community and the larger world. So what we're going to do tonight here, and hopefully those of you online are going to be doing this at home, we're going to read chunks of the book out loud, and I'm going to encourage you to ask now, at this moment in your life, what questions the Book of Ruth is raising for you. Some of you might have read it 100 times, some of you might not have read it very often, but what questions emerge for you? Let me just set the background. We read in Deuteronomy, an Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. To their 10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of the Lord forever, because they met you not with bread and with water in the way when you came out of Egypt. No Moabite or Ammonite can ever enter into the community of the Israelites. Did I mention that Ruth was a Moabite? So, with that question, I'd like to ask somebody to read out loud the first number 2, which is the beginning of the book. Who has the mic?
In the days when the chieftains ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah, with his wife and 2 sons, went to reside in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and his 2 sons were named Mahlon and Chilion, I hope, Euphrates of Bethlehem in Judah. They came to the country of Moab and remained there.
Okay, what do we know about this family? Right, there's this guy, Elimelech. He's married to Naomi. He has 2 sons. There was a famine. They came to the country of Moab, and they remained there, okay? That's what we know. There's a midrash, or rabbinic commentary, that wants to explain why they came. Somebody else read what's in italics.
Why was Elimelech punished? Because he struck despair into the hearts of Israel. He was like a prominent and prosperous man who dwelt in a certain country, and the people for that country depended on him and said that if famine should come, he could supply the whole country with food for 10 years. So Elimelech was notable of his town and a leader of the generation. But when the famine came, he said, now all Israel will come knocking at my door for help, each one with a basket. Therefore he fled from them. This is the meaning of the verse in Ruth. Prominent man of the house of bread in Judah went to live in the fields of Moab, which was condemned in Deuteronomy, for refusing to give bread and water to the refugee Jews leaving Egypt.
Okay, so how does the midrash explain the punishment to Elimelech? What was the punishment? You'll see in the next verse, on the next page, he died. So how does the midrash explain who he was and why he was punished? He was a prominent ish. They didn't have to say he was an ish, a man, but the word that means dafka, big man, he was a man, a prominent man, a leader of the community. It does not mean he was a mensch. How do we know he was not a mensch? He didn't want to take care of people, right? But he could have. I know it's coming. I have enough money that I could actually be helping people who are going to need help, but I'm not going to do it. He leaves, and he stays there instead of staying in Bethlehem helping people. What issues does that raise for you at this moment in time in your personal lives or in the life of our country? Who is abandoning whom now? He's abandoning the people. How does that resonate with you? Okay, so is there like a echo here, you know? Are there people who have the means to be protecting other people who need to be protected, but big guys, men, are not stepping up to that role? You could say, like the president, I don't want to get into politics here, but it's hard not to, yeah? Right.
So had not yet adopted what we might now, at least in the Jewish community, consider universal values.
So exactly,
Could you please briefly recall what
Mikey
Mikey said?
recognizes that this is a slight reference to Noah, who builds an ark. He's considered to be righteous in his generation, but he doesn't build an ark for everybody. So he's kind of good enough, but maybe he could have done better. And one of the things that you see when you read the Book of Ruth is a lot of echoes. In some ways, Ruth is like Abraham, leaving her home. I mean, and you see these references. So whoever wrote the Book of Ruth knows very well the Hebrew Bible and is riffing on relationships that we might be familiar with. Yes? Karen?
Karen, can you just use this so that they can hear you online?
There are different ways of fleeing, right? You can physically flee like Elimelech did, or you can flee essentially by being a coward, right? By not accepting the responsibility that or the good that you can do for others. And it also makes me think of the story of Jonah.
Okay, very good connection between Jonah, who's running away from responsibility, for different reasons probably, but he's running away. How else do people in our universe, remember I live in Los Angeles, how do people who could be helpful hide from the people whom they might want to help? Take away services. Pretend it's okay. They move to gated communities and don't let other people in. They don't notice the homeless people that are lying on the street, right? This is a real thing. And Elimelech was the guy who could have made a difference, and he chooses instead. He doesn't want to help other people. He takes his family and he flees. And for this, according to the Midrash, that's why he's punished. So now let's look at the continuation of the story. We're reading number 3. Somebody want to read?
Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women.
Or did I mention that Ruth was a Moabite?
One named Orpah and the other Ruth. And they lived there about 10 years. Then those 2, Mahlon and Chilion, also died. So the woman was left without her 2 sons and without her husband. She started out with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. For in the country of Moab, she had heard that the Lord had taken note of his people and given them food.
Okay, so what was the change that happened in Bethlehem? Say it again. The famine ended, right? Again, we have famines in the biblical story, right? So this is again a echo of other parts of the biblical story. Okay, keep going.
Accompanied by her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living, and they set out on the road back to the land of Judah.
Okay, now here comes a pretty familiar text. Keep reading.
But Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Turn back, each of you, to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant that each of you find security in the house of a husband."
So what is she saying to these daughters-in-law?
Just leave her.
Yeah,
Go home.
I'm going back, you go home.
Yeah.
Go home to your people, your family.
They broke into weeping and said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi replied, "Turn back, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I any more sons in my body who might be husbands for you? Turn back, my daughters, for I am too old to be married. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I were married tonight and I also bore sons, you should wait for them to grow up."
Should you wait for them to grow up?
Should you wait for them to grow up? Should you, on their account, debar yourselves from marriage? Oh no, my daughters, my lot is far more bitter than yours, for the hand of the Lord has struck out against me.
Keep going.
Okay. They broke into weeping again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell. But Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods. Go follow your sister-in-law." But Ruth replied, "Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me, if anything but death parts me from you."
Okay, stop there and tell me what your associations are with those words. Where you go, I will go. What?
Devotion, she's going to go. She's going to be committed to being with this person.
She's committed to being with this person, but when you think about this text, where do you think about it coming up? At a wedding, right? We think about this as what partners promise to each other. But this is not that. This is not a wedding text. This is a text about a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law. This is a surprise. Back to the end of those lines.
When Naomi saw how determined she was to go with her, she ceased to argue with her, and the two went on until they reached Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city buzzed with excitement over them.
Okay, that's the that's there. It was late when I was typing. So they come back to Bethlehem, and what does it mean that the whole city was excited, buzzed? I mean, why? What do they remember about Naomi? Well, they don't know who Ruth is, right? But what do they remember about Naomi? She was married to a rich man, right? They left probably with a lot of money, right? And she's coming back in a very different state. And everybody, the whole city is like astonished. Could this be Naomi? So I want to say something about those three women. They're at different life stages. Naomi is an older widow. How would you describe her state of mind? Depressed, right? Everything that she cared for has, turned out to be horrible, right? She's pretty depressed. Is she hopeful about the future? Probably not. She doesn't seem to be, right? What can you tell me about Orpah? She's ready to start. Well, Orpah is ready to go home, right? So she's at a moment of decision in her life, and she chooses to stay where she is and to go back to her family, to her gods, right? By the way, Oprah Winfrey mispronounced Orpah. That's where she gets this name, as far as I know. In a moment, we're going to look at what these names mean because they're significant. Tell me about Ruth. What do we know about her? She's loyal to this older woman who's pretty depressed. Her mother-in-law, and she won't take no for an answer. She's very determined, right? Are any of you mothers-in-law? Raise your hand if you're a mother-in-law. Look around the room. Raise your hand if you had a mother-in-law. Okay, so most everybody. What would you say conventional wisdom is about mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law or sons-in-law? Keep your mouth shut, right? It's a rarity to have a mother-in-law that you actually love and get along with. Really? Well, here's a joke. Here's a joke. There were two mother-in-laws who were arguing. This is a folk tale. Once there were these two grooms who were matched from a far away yeshiva to marry two daughters of the town, right? Marriages were made, right? And so these two guys were coming to marry these two women with whom they had been, these marriages had been arranged. They'd never seen each other before, but they're going to meet their brides, okay. Unfortunately, while crossing the river outside the town, one of the grooms was drowned. So now there's only one groom coming back. And who gets to marry this groom? So the families go to the rabbi of the town to decide who gets the remaining groom, which is good. You want to have your daughter get married, right? And who gets the dead one? So the rabbi consults the story of King Solomon and the two prostitutes with one living child and one dead one. You remember that story? The Rav, in that case, you know, the one who said, let the baby be cut in half, was obviously the real mother, right? But in this case, the rabbi asked the living chatan be cut in half to share equally. Okay, in other words, okay? One protested that the chatan should be allowed to live, give him to the other family. But the second mother-in-law said, cut him in half. The Rav triumphantly announced, now there's no need to cut the chatan in half. We know that the true mother-in-law is the one who wanted him cut in half. So that's the joke. That's the folk tale about mothers-in-law. But just in case you think it's a joke, Maimonides, the famous medieval commentator, doctor, physician, wrote a code of Jewish law. He argues that a woman can refuse to allow her mother-in-law and sisters-in-law into her house or to live with them in the same courtyard because they are presumed to be vindictive and demeaning to her. So Maimonides says that. And then he, in his laws of divorce, he says, daughters-in-law and mothers-in-law cannot serve as witnesses one about the other because they are presumed to hate one another. So in case you think that the challenges that mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, sons-in-law have now, it turns out, at least in the time of Maimonides, talking about the 12th century, that was an issue then as well. Look at how rabbinic tradition understands what Ruth says to Naomi. Now we're on the next page. It's number 4, and it is in italics. Somebody read?
Elazar said,
Rabbi Elazar said, this is from the Talmud, go ahead.
what does the text mean when it says, and she, Naomi, saw that she, Ruth, was determined to go with her, and she ceased to speak with her? Naomi said to her, we are forbidden to exit the Sabbath limits.
Remember, on Shabbat, you're not allowed to walk past a certain distance.
Ruth responded, where you go, I will go. Naomi said to her, we are forbidden privacy between a man and a woman who are not married. Ruth responded, where you lie, I will lie. Naomi said to her, we have been commanded 613 commandments. Ruth responded, your nation is my nation. Naomi said to her, we are forbidden idolatry. And Ruth responded, and your God is my God. Naomi said to her, 4 capital punishments have been entrusted to the courts. And Ruth responded, however you die, I will die. Naomi said to her, 2 graves have been entrusted to the courts. And Ruth responded, and there I will be buried. Immediately, and she, Naomi, saw that she, Ruth, was determined to go with her.
So what are the rabbis doing here? How are they understanding this famous text? It's an argument, and what is Ruth doing by answering these questions the way she does? She's converting. This becomes a text for conversion. 3 times Naomi says, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Traditionally, when somebody comes to a rabbi for conversion, you're supposed to say, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. If they come back, you say, okay, here are the rules. And then, if you accept those rules, you officially have converted. Or, now there's a mikvah, but this becomes the proof text for actually converting. Now, the question is, why do the rabbis tell this story that Ruth actually converted when there's no evidence in the text itself, right? We don't see her going to the mikveh in the text. We don't see anything about an official entrance into the official Jewish community. Oh, did I mention Ruth was a Moabite? Why would the rabbis want to do this?
Why would the rabbis want to do what?
Why would the rabbis want to say that Ruth actually converted? Because of number one? So would she stop being a Moabite because she converted? Okay, so they need for her not to be a Moabite. We're going to see later on why it's urgent to them that she not be a Moabite. And the other thing the rabbis do when they read this text is they say, oh, we weren't talking about Moabite women, we were only talking about Moabite men. In other words, they need to get around this problem that Moabites can't be entered into the community of Israel. So as I read this year, I began to think about conversion. It's a very powerful experience to be a rabbi, a clergy person, at the conversion of somebody. The person typically studies for a period of time. I'm sure the same rules operate out of this synagogue as well. And when the rabbi or the sponsoring clergy feels that the candidate is ready, you bring that candidate in front of a Beit Din, a Jewish court, 3 knowledgeable Jews, and you ask them questions about why they're doing this and what their spiritual journey has meant. You want to just say a word about what that experience is like for you as a clergy person? Say it into the mic.
So it's one of the favorite things that I get to do. I look around this room. There are a number of people who are Jews by choice in this room, and we know, how important, when we look at people who are here on Friday nights, and at other times we have all these people who have come into our community and enriched our Jewish community in so many ways. And so it's an amazing thing, and then they often are able to, although we're starting to do it formally, but used to do it informally, mentor others who come into Jewish life and become people who help them through that process as well. So it's a lovely experience, and it's powerful for those who go through it, and it's powerful for the rabbis and for the family members and for all of those other folks who are part of the process as well.
So, for me, thinking about this at this particular moment, given all the changes in the Jewish community, I began to think about ways in which Jews by choice, but also non-Jewish members of Jewish families, have transformed Judaism. This is different from what I would have said 50 years ago when I first started rabbinical school. The world is really changing, and our attitudes towards fellow travelers and people who actively choose Judaism has changed over these years. So let's just take a minute, and somebody want to share something about, in your experience, in what ways have Jews by choice, or again, non-Jewish members of Jewish families, how has that transformed Judaism?
Well, we had a lovely experience, though, when I shared this with the rabbi, not Rabbi Kubitz, he didn't think it was so lovely. We have a daughter-in-law who has recently chosen Judaism, and when I did not know, she hadn't shared with the family that she was going through this process. She and my son and their one child, who's about to be 10, always enjoyed a Jewish family, largely by her leadership. They always did Shabbat, she always made challah, etc. And one day she called me to tell me that, in fact, she had officially chosen Judaism, and she chose not to use the word conversion. To her, that meant that somehow she had changed, and she didn't feel that she had changed. I think she just felt that she became who she was. Whatever that meant to her, it was not a conversion. She also chose not to tell our grandson, who at the time was 8. And she said she may tell him at some point, but she didn't want to tell him now because she didn't want him to think that last week his mommy wasn't Jewish and this week she was. And I just thought it was lovely.
That's very lovely. Just a word about Shavuot. According to tradition, tonight we all return to Mount Sinai, right? In fact, if you see somebody that looks familiar but you can't remember where you met, you say, I must have been standing near you at Mount Sinai, right? And the tradition says every Jew who ever was or ever will be was present at Mount Sinai. Every Jewish soul. And so in fact, what your daughter-in-law is saying is she was always there. She just now is able to acknowledge that. But so it's interesting. I mean, part of the difficulty with the word conversion is that it actually has a sort of Christian notion in the sense that it implies a kind of a change of faith. Where for a lot of us, it isn't really about faith. It's about culture. It's about family. And so the word actually is problematic. And that's interesting for us to think about when we speak about Jews by choice. The other thing you could say is that all of us are Jews by choice, because you don't have to be here tonight, right? We all, in our own way, are choosing to try to find a way to make Judaism meaningful in our life. And in that way, maybe it's not so different from those people who grew up in another faith community.
Yeah. This morning I was filling out papers for Cedar Sinai. There's a hospital here named like that. And the papers talk about race.
and I saw that there's Jewish, so you click on it, so you can say you're white, this or that, or whatever. And then it says Jewish, so I click on it, and I think, oh, interesting, it doesn't divide Sephardic and Ashkenazi. And through my journey with breast cancer, there's always the question with the oncologist, are you, because then you say Jewish, are you an Ashkenazi Jew? Because you're more prone to getting the breast cancer. Now, that was interesting that in a hospital and I was trying not to answer the question because I don't know if it's safe to say that you're Jewish, even if it's a Cedar-Sinai. And, but it was, I find it very interesting that that wasn't specified, and I thought maybe I should write the administration, say, hey, because you're dealing with other, so then I come to the question here with Ruth, that it's interesting that they use women to this, like you said, the conversion. In conversion, they don't want father Jews. You know, some people don't want father Jews. So then I think it's interesting that the converted mothers, here these are mothers of women, that the rabbis even choose women to be converted.
Okay,
and
so
then they're not accepted in certain circles.
this is also a book we're going to see more and more about women and women who are marginal. So that's an important piece of this. You know, two things come up for me in listening to you. One is, which ones of us would have believed 10 years ago that anybody would be afraid to say they were Jewish, or that anybody would be afraid to wear any kind of jewelry? I wear the hostage tag, or kippah, or people that wear tzitzit don't want to do that in public places. I mean, there was a recent study, but I mean, the world is changing in ways that are very scary. So that's one thing that comes up. The other thing that comes up in my world, and as I look around here, I see it as well. We live in an Ashkenormative world, at least I do in West LA, right? The people in High Village LA, this partnership between Temple Isaiah and Temple Emmanuel, of people, active aging project that's very exciting. All of us, except for one or two people, are either Ashkenazic or are Jews of color, but not typically Mizrahi. And so that's interesting when you sort of think about how you think about the Jewish community. Other comments?
Growing up as Jewish, I didn't, even though I studied, I went to Hebrew school, whatever, I didn't study being Jewish and take for granted, you know, this is what we do on this holiday, and this holiday, and this holiday. But the people who are either, who have converted or are supportive of non-Jews being supportive, they're like the rabbis in the room. They know so much more. They've studied so much more deeply, and I learned so much more about my culture from them.
It's interesting. One of the things that I've experienced in my life, because of people that have grown up in other spiritual traditions choosing Judaism, is that there's a lot more focus now on spirituality than there was when I was growing up in my legacy Reform synagogue. Very often, people who choose Judaism are coming out of a place where faith and the ability to speak about divinity in their lives, they've brought that to the Jewish community. And now we have institutions like the Institute for Jewish Spirituality that Diane mentioned. One of the founders of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality was a person who chose Judaism, a very wonderful teacher named Rabbi Rachel Cowan. You know, people bring their life experience to their spiritual journeys, and those spiritual journeys are often influenced by what they were comfortable with growing up. So that's something that I find very important and I'm extremely grateful for.
Just as people are identifying how they identify with the culture of Judaism and with their faith, I had an interesting experience with I think he was a 5-year-old grandson at the time. He came home from school, kindergarten, and said, "How come nobody told me I was Jewish?" It was Hanukkah or Rosh Hashanah or something. And he just thought the whole world was Jewish.
Yeah, a lot depends on where you live. Okay, let's continue. We're reading number 5.
Who would like to read?
When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city buzzed with excitement over them. The women said, "Can this be Naomi?" "Do not call me Naomi," she replied. "Call me Mara. For Shaddai,
One of the names of God, Shaddai.
for Shaddai has made my lot very bitter. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. How can you call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me, when Shaddai has brought misfortune upon me?" Thus Naomi returned from the country of Moab. She returned with her daughter-in-law, Ruth, the Moabite. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest.
Did I mention that Ruth was a Moabite? I mean, notice what the author of this book is doing. He keeps telling us, Ruth is a Moabite. Ruth is a Moabite. Ruth is a Moabite. And what is the significance of the barley harvest? Barley is the harvest, right? The really important harvest is the wheat harvest. So why are we reading this book on Shavuot? Because it's connected to the harvest, the spring harvest, first the barley harvest, and then the wheat harvest, which we're going to see later on. How do you feel about the response of the women in Bethlehem? Right, what is that word? When Schadenfreude, right? Yeah, she thought she was such a big deal. Look at her now, yeah? I acknowledge that I do sometimes feel that way about certain people, right? Anybody else? I mean, do we see this in our lives, in our communities in any way? How the mighty hath fallen, and how happy I am about that. Other reactions? Yeah?
I don't know how relevant it is, but I can't help but think about the fact that the Elimelech and Naomi, or Elazar, whatever his name was, went to Moab because there was a famine in Bethlehem, right? And they took advantage of the generosity of the Moabites, or at least the resources of the Moabites, and now she's going back. So not only talking about Schadenfreude, but I also think about those in our own world who leave their country to come and, try to improve their lot here. Sometimes they go back, sometimes they don't go back. But they seem to maintain a very strong connection with their homeland, whereas Naomi seems to had been totally cut off from any relationship with Bethlehem when she returns.
Except that she hears that the famine is over. So
Right.
clearly, and remember, there's,
Well, she's got the internet.
Yeah, she's got the internet, right? And remember that, the Israelites went into Egypt because, Joseph and his brothers, and so going into another place and then coming back, and, that was probably part of the, the social ecology of the ancient Near East when there was a lot of famine. But I think that Cantor raises an interesting thing for us to think about now, with people who are coming to the United States to study, and are they going back, and and should we be enabling them here to take the skills that they learn here and go back to their own countries? Are they going to be it raises questions for us that it wouldn't have raised 5 years ago, or at least for me,
Right.
10 years ago.
And I guess that was not a point that I was making. I take your point, right? I think that the communication integration is creating a much more globally accessible world, and that we're looking at boundaries and peoples in a very old way, not looking forward to what it really means to be a citizen of the world. And a lot of the tension that we have now are people trying to provincialize and retreat into their silos of nationality and territory. And
Right.
maybe that's a model that's
I think, an important comment. You might have read in the New York Times this morning about the library on the border between Canada and Vermont, that half of it is in Vermont and half of it is Canada, and now you can't go in without a passport. I mean, you talk about, you got to be kidding. Except, right, but I think that's, these issues get raised. So listen, here's some interesting things. On the next page, Beit Lechem, literally, Bethlehem, literally means the house of bread. How ironic is that? Elimelech, my God is king, a big guy. Machlon, son number 1, his name means disease. Chilion, son number 2, his name means destruction. This is not a true story. This is a fable, right? And each of the names evoke something that we are meant to understand about the character. Naomi means pleasant. Orpah, stiff-necked. Ruth, we don't exactly know what the sort of origin of that name is, but it either comes from rivaya, which means overflowing abundance, satisfied, or full, or it comes from the word re'ut, which means friendship. You know the word ruthless? It comes from the meaning, one of those meanings of Ruth. Boaz, who we're going to meet in a minute, means from strength. So these names give you a sense of how you are meant to think about these characters. I love this moment in the story, going back to what Naomi says to the women. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. How can you call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me? Ruth, who's just given up everything, is standing next to her, probably thinking, and what am I, chopped liver? Right, she doesn't come back with nothing. She comes back with this daughter-in-law who is eventually going to save her, right? How often do we not notice the people who are standing next to us, who in fact are the sources of our renewal. Karen?
I've been thinking about the drama of this and this conversation being had, right? And to think of it as, you know, almost like the community, the women snickering, right? Can this be Naomi? Like, very cruelly. And Naomi makes herself small, almost. Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, bitter. And so I almost feel like maybe there's even something else going on here, almost like playing the crowd, right? Making herself, playing the crowd, like making herself small. And maybe she made Ruth small as she made herself small, sort of in a way of redeeming. She can only go up from here, right?
Or you could, well, you might be able to go down from there too, or maybe if she makes herself small, these women will leave her alone.
Exactly.
Who does Naomi blame? God. So this raised a question for me. When, you'll excuse the expression, when shit happens to you, who do you blame? How often do we blame? Who do we blame? I mean, and who should we blame? And do we blame God? I can't tell you the number of times I have been in hospital rooms with people who have very serious illness, who will say, why is God doing this to me? This is not the right time for a theological discussion, but you need to blame. Sometimes shit just happens, right? Why is God doing this to me? You never ask that when everything is good. Why is God doing this to me? So that raised an important question for me at this moment in my life. As I grow older, as my body changes, as lots of people that I love are dealing with pretty serious shit, as in terms of illness or how do I think about that? And why is it so hard to just acknowledge that, yeah, cancer happens, yes. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Yes, clearly. That's right, right. That's right. If you believe that God is in charge of everything, and what's interesting about the Book of Ruth is that God is in the story, but sort of as a back player, right? I mean, Boaz, we'll see, uses God, may God bless you, but it's not like in the book of Job, one of the other references, is Naomi like Job? But in Job's case, it's really God playing with Job, right? This is not that vision of divinity, yeah?
Just my own personal beliefs. I believe that God doesn't do bad things to you. He doesn't give you cancer. He doesn't cause that flood in Kentucky or the earthquake in California. I think he gives us, if we seek it, the strength to deal with those calamities. And so, I just don't think it's possible that God can bestow cancer on one of us and do it intentionally. I can't even wrap my head around that thought.
Okay, so that's an interesting, important response, made most famous by Harold Kushner in the book When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Not if bad things happen to good people, but when bad things happen to good people. And that's a very powerful sort of theology, as it were, if that's your theology, right? But there are some people who actually believe that, God did choose this person and not that person. And that raises all kinds of other questions, right? So who do you blame? Or do you blame? Or how do you move forward? Those are questions that I think are important. Okay, number 6.
Diane?
Now, Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a man of substance of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz.
Okay, this is interesting. Boaz is introduced here, and then he disappears from the story until later when he emerges. So this is like, if you're writing a movie and there's a gun in the house, right? You got to get back to the gun at some point, right? So Boaz is introduced. Does Naomi know that she has this kinsman? We don't know. All we know is that she had a kinsman on her husband's side, a big guy, and this kinsman's name is Boaz. Okay, keep going.
Ruth the Moabite said...
Did I tell you she was a Moabite?
Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, I would like to go to the fields and glean among the ears of grain, behind someone who may show me kindness. Yes, daughter, go, she replied, and off she went. She came and gleaned in a field behind the reapers, and as luck would have it, it was the piece of land belonging to Boaz, who was of Elimelech's family. Presently Boaz arrived from Bethlehem. He greeted the reapers.
So remember, they're in Bethlehem, but the fields are outside of Bethlehem, okay?
Greeted them, the Lord be with you. And they responded, the Lord bless you. Boaz said to the servant who was in charge of the reapers, whose girl is that? The servant in charge of the reapers replied, she is a Moabite girl who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. She has been on her feet ever since she came this morning. She has rested but little in the hut. Boaz said to Ruth, listen to me, daughter. Don't go to glean in another field. Don't go elsewhere, but stay here, close to my girls. Keep your eyes on the field they are reaping, and follow them. I have ordered the men not to molest you, and when you are thirsty, go to the jars and drink some of the water that the men have drawn.
Okay, why does she need this protection? No? Because she's a woman working in the fields, right? And there are men that are working in the fields, and if nobody's watching, then the women can be raped or hurt or whatever. So it was not so safe to be a woman who was poor enough to be reaping in the fields. And you remember that you're supposed to leave the corners of your fields for people who need food. So Ruth and these girls, these other women, that's what they're doing. They're reaping the corners of the fields, of Boaz's fields. Keep going.
She prostrated herself with her face to the ground and said to him, why are you so kind as to single me out when I am a foreigner? Boaz said in reply, I have been told of all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother in the land of your birth and came to a people who you had not known before. May the Lord reward your deeds. May you have a full recompense from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have sought refuge. She answered, you are most kind, my Lord, to comfort me and to speak gently to your maidservant, though I am not so much as one of your maidservants. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, come over here and partake of the meal and dip your morsel in the vinegar. So she sat down beside the reapers. He handed her roasted grain, and she ate her fill and had some left over. When she got up again to glean, Boaz gave orders to his workers. You are not only to let her glean among the sheaves without interference, but you must also put some stalks out of the heaps and leave them for her to glean and not scold her. She gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned. It was about an ephah of barley.
Okay, so what is Boaz doing? What? He's leaving her extra food. He's really protecting her. He's making it safe for her. Why is he doing this? Because of what she did for Naomi. Why else?
The kinsman.
Does he like her? We don't know that, right? He's meeting her for the first time, right? Well, it's a good question. He clearly knows she's a Moabite, and in case he doesn't, she says, I'm a foreigner. Why are you doing this to me? So why is Boaz doing this?
It's also a widow and a stranger. We protect the widow and the stranger.
Okay, he's doing what Israelites are supposed to do, protecting the widow and the stranger. And he's probably a really nice guy, right? Does he have to do this? No, he doesn't have to do this, but he's doing it. You know, is it because she's young and beautiful? We don't know, but she's clearly young. We don't know more than that. Okay, keep going.
An ephah of barley, and carried it back with her to the town. When her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and when she also took out and gave her what had been left over after eating her fill, her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be he who took such generous notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law whom she had worked with, saying, "The name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz." Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be the Lord who has not failed in his kindness to the living or to the dead. For," Naomi explained to her daughter-in-law, "the man is related to us. He is one of our redeeming kinsmen."
Notice the beginning of change in Naomi. What is the beginning of change?
She's appreciative.
She's getting to be appreciative. And who has suddenly been kind to her? The Lord, okay? So notice there's a beginning of a transformation in Naomi. Keep going.
Ruth the Moabite said, "He even told me, 'Stay close by my workers until all my harvest is finished.' And Naomi answered her daughter-in-law Ruth, 'It is best, daughter, that you go out with his girls and not be annoyed in some other field.' So she stayed close to the maidservants of Boaz and gleaned until the barley harvest and the wheat harvest were finished. Then she stayed at home with her mother-in-law."
Okay, why does she stay home now? The harvest is over, right? So now, what's she going to do? The harvest is over, and you see the transition from the barley to the wheat harvest. Anything else you want to tell me about Boaz? Can we have a mic here?
I'm sorry. I think when you said that Boaz didn't really have to protect her, it was a choice. I would say it's really not a choice because, as you said, he was a truly good guy. And in order to be true to himself, he really didn't have a choice.
Okay, so that's interesting that he is just a really good guy. But legally, did he have to do it? No, legally he didn't, okay? But he did it anyway. Who initiates the action in this part of the book? Boaz initiates some action. Who else? And who else? Ruth. She's the one who says, "Okay, Mom, I'm going out into the fields," right? So she's the first actor. Then we have Boaz, the second actor. And now we have Naomi. Now, again, one of the questions of the story is, how come she didn't send Ruth right away to Boaz, right? He's a kinsman. She knew this, or at least she remembers it at this moment, right? So that's a kind of an interesting dynamic here. You need this to have a story, but it's still a little surprising that we don't have her saying, "Okay, we're going back to Bethlehem and we're going to check out this redeeming kinsman." Okay, a couple of other comments.
Maybe she didn't send Ruth right away because she wasn't sure how she would be accepted when she came back from Moab.
Okay, good possibility. Anybody else? Okay, and then after this we get to the Hollywood moment of the story.
Why are you making a distinction between morality and legality?
Hold that question, okay, because we're going to get to it.
Holding.
Okay. While you have the mic, somebody on that table, read number 6.
Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "Daughter, I must seek a home for you where you may be happy. Now there is our kinsman Boaz, whose girls you are close to. He will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight."
Remember, after the harvest festival, we have to find a way to make Ruth safe. Keep going.
"So bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not disclose yourself to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he lies down, and go over and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what you are to do." She replied, "I will do everything you tell me." She went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. Boaz ate and drank, and in a cheerful mood went to lie down beside the grain pile. Then she went over stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. In the middle of the night, the man gave a start and pulled back. There was a woman lying at his feet.
By the way, feet is a euphemism for genitals. Feet is a euphemism for genitals. So she is uncovering his genitals. Okay, remember, they're alone outside of town. He's a little drunk. She lies down by his feet. And so what is going on here? Keep going.
"Who are you?" he asked, and she replied, "I am your handmaid Ruth. Spread your robe over your handmaid, for you are a redeeming kinsman." He exclaimed, "Be blessed of the Lord, daughter. Your latest deed of loyalty is greater than the first, in that you have not turned to a younger man, whether poor or rich."
So remember, he's old, she's young, and he is understanding what she is offering at this moment, and he says, wow. Keep going.
"And now, daughter, have no fear. I will do in your behalf whatever you ask for all the elders of my town. Know what a fine woman you are."
So notice how Ruth's reputation has already begun to change. Keep going.
"But while it is true I am a redeeming kinsman, there is another redeemer closer than I. Stay for the night. Then in the morning, if he will act as redeemer, good, let him redeem. But if he does not want to act as redeemer for you, I will do so myself, as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning." So she lay at his feet until dawn. She rose before one person could distinguish another, for he thought, "Let it not be known that the woman who came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Hold out the shawl that you are wearing." She held it while he measured out 6 measures of barley, and he put it on her back. When she got back to town, she came to her mother-in-law, who asked, "How is it with you, daughter?" She told her all that the man had done for her, and she added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying to me, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" And Naomi said, "Stay here, daughter, till you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today."
So did they sleep together? Yes? So there's a big debate in the rabbinic tradition about whether they actually slept together or not. But what else do we know about Boaz's concern for Ruth? He's protecting her, and what else? I don't know if he wants to find a younger person. He's saying that you came here to me instead of finding a younger person, rich or poor. this is really nice of you. But he's also protecting her reputation, right? What does it mean that this woman goes to the threshing floor late at night knowing he's alone? And what was Naomi suggesting to Ruth when she sends her to do this? What is she doing? Well, she's basically setting up for an opportunity to this vulnerable woman to be a sexual object, right? We don't know what's going to happen, right? He says, he'll tell you what to do. But then what happens? Back to the story, what happens? Who tells whom what to do? Boaz. Naomi says Boaz will tell you what to do. And then what does Ruth say? I am your handmaid Ruth. Spread your robe over your handmaid, for you are a redeeming kinsman. She now turns to this person, Boaz, and tells him what to do. So notice it's amazing how these characters change. And it also evokes a biblical story. You remember the story of Judah and Tamar in the book of Genesis. Judah, our ancestor. His daughter-in-law Tamar was married to a son, the son dies. Married to another son, the son dies. And there's a little boy, and he basically says, you have to wait till he grows up because you have to marry her. And she gets tired of waiting. She dresses up like a prostitute. He sleeps with her, and then she gets pregnant. And then he says, you've been in mourning, you got pregnant, the punishment for that is death. But Tamar had said to him, Tamar, dressed as a prostitute, had said, okay, I'll sleep with you, but you have to leave your credit cards with me, and your staff, and so she's pregnant, and he wants her to be killed, and then she brings back his credit card, and he realizes that he is in fact the one who made her pregnant, and she gives birth to a child named Peretz. Peretz means breach. Okay, a breach. This was a breach, right? Not a breech birth, but a challenge to what was right. So notice there are a couple of stories when women take matters into their own hands because they can't use power directly. And this is another example. After, there's a whole other little side. If somebody dies and doesn't leave an heir, a kinsman needs to marry that person, and then so that the new child stays in the family and the inheritance doesn't leave that family. And there was another redeemer who could have done it, who decides that he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to do it because if he does it, it might challenge the inheritance of his own children. So he basically says, I'm not going to be the redeeming kinsman. Okay, so now we're in the middle of the next page, and this is the end of the story. Somebody read?
And Boaz said to the elders and to the rest of the people, you are witnesses today that I am acquiring from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. I am also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, as my wife, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate, that the name of the deceased may not disappear from among his kinsmen and from the gate of his hometown. You are witnesses today. All the people at the gate and the elders answered, we are. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built up the house of Israel. Prosper in Ephratah.
That's the former name of Bethlehem. Keep going.
And perpetuate your name in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the offspring which the Lord will give you by this young woman. So Boaz married Ruth. She became his wife, and he cohabited with her. The Lord let her conceive, and she bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain your old age, for he is born of your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons. Naomi took the child and held it to her bosom. She became its foster mother, and the women neighbors gave him a name, saying, A son is born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, father of David. This is the line of Perez. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Aminadab. Aminadab begot Nachshon. Nachshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz. Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David.
And who is David? Who is David?
King David.
King David. The Messiah comes from the house of King David. What's transgressive about this? It came from a Moabite. It came from a Moabite. That is so amazingly transgressive, right? Did we mention a few times that Ruth was a Moabite? So this book is basically challenging the notion of law, right? And what really struck me is that the first time the word love appears in this book is what the women say to Naomi. This baby will renew your life and sustain your old age, for he is born of your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons. No mention of Boaz and Ruth loving each other, no about Elimelech and Naomi loving each other, but this is love between this daughter-in-law and this mother. And what does Naomi do with this baby? She raises him. And so Ruth sort of drops out of the story, doesn't she? Right? And that's amazing to me. And what's also amazing to me in the story about women and women's friendship, who is missing from the genealogy? Any women, right? Tamar's not mentioned and Ruth's not mentioned. It's only men. So again, this is an interesting challenge, and probably the end here is, a way to kind of claim it back to something more familiar, because it's not atypical in the genealogies that we see in the book of Genesis and in Exodus that it's all about men. I want to say one other thing. Who is Perez? Is the child of Tamar and Judah. Nachshon, who is the son of Aminadab. Where do you all know the story of Nachshon? Tell me that story. He's the one that jumped into the water, right? So this is a line of people taking risks, jumping into the water before the water opens, right? This is the line that King David comes out of, and it's connected to Ruth, the Moabite.
I just have a question. I don't understand, why does Ruth give the baby to Naomi?
It's a good question. Why? I mean, again, this is a fable. What is the point of the story here? It's Naomi's story more than it's Ruth's, right? Although it is called the Book of Ruth. Interesting. Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt that discussion before I throw out my next comment.
Go ahead.
It kind of speaks to me about if this is the line that comes from a Moabite, does it not tell us then that any Jew by choice is the same and equal to a person born of a Jewish mother?
Seems absolutely to tell that, right? I mean, redemption enters into the world because of the actions of Ruth. Very powerful. And so what are we doing here? I think, as your rabbi started, that this is a moment in time where we're all dealing with a lot of loss. Some of it is personal loss, and some of it is a lot of communal loss. There's a way that you could read this story as a response to loss and mourning, right? What does it teach you about healing from the loss of loved ones or other kinds of losses? What does the book teach us? There's a future, right? No matter how bad things are right at this moment, when you feel like it couldn't get worse, it could get worse, but it also could get better. And that's a powerful, again, in my life at this moment, dealing with a lot of loss, this book is very comforting.
I think that Ruth shows that she seems to grow up with belief in God, at least in behavior, whereas Naomi has had doubts. And so more blessed perhaps is one that has not had the doubts as much as Naomi.
Okay, that's an interesting possibility, but remember that Ruth grew up with her gods and her people, but she makes a transference to Naomi's God. But I think, who knows what it was like to be a Moabite girl in those days, right? I mean, clearly there's a kinship network. They're going back to their families, presumably. But yes, so what role does faith have in our lives? And how is that helpful or not helpful when we deal with issues of loss? So this year, for me, this was important. Why do we read this on Shavuot? Because of the harvest? But what else is Shavuot about? You remember that Shavuot, it's the one biblical holiday that doesn't have a specific date. You start counting the day after Passover. You count 49 days, and then on the 50th, it's Shavuot. And in the biblical story, it's about the harvest. By the time the rabbis get to this story, get to the biblical story, it's 1,000 years later, we're not farmers anymore. What do they do about Shavuot? It's still a biblical commandment that you count for 49 days, and then on the 50th it's Shavuot. How do they translate it? They translate it as a spiritual harvest, and they make Shavuot the day that we receive Torah, Matan Torah, the giving of Torah. Not in the Bible at all. The story of Shavuot connected to law, not in the Bible at all. But by the time of the rabbis, it becomes the giving of the law. And what is the giving of the law? It's law. It's law. What does the Book of Ruth suggest to us about law? A, it can be changed, but B, what else does it tell us? This is not a book about law. It's a book about you do stuff beyond the letter of the law. That law is not enough. It needs to be softened by love, by compassion, by chesed, loving kindness. Look at the last page. I'm going to read the bottom of that little text. Rabbi Zera says, this Megillah, this scroll, has nothing to say about purity and impurity. It has nothing to say about forbidden and permitted. So why was it written if it has no legal significance? To teach you how great the reward is for doing acts of emet v'chesed, of truth and loving kindness. And then here's a midrash. Ruth Rabbah, in saying that Megillat Ruth is a book of chesed, it redeems the lack of chesed of the Moabites to Israel in the desert, hence earning Ruth's access to the Jewish people despite the law. Every commendable act in the book goes beyond the letter of the law. Even the final redemption by Boaz, which appears to go beyond the classical requirement of Yibum, which is being the Redeemer. Those who only follow the law, like Orpah and Ploni Almoni, a regular guy, lose their place in the narrative. Even though they're not evil people, they're just ordinary people. And then Rabbi Zira says this Megillah has nothing of purity and impurity. It is to teach us that the highest value is lifnim mishurat hadin, going beyond the letter of the law. So, who am I in the story? Am I Orpah? She's not a bad person. She didn't do anything wrong. This guy who didn't redeem, he didn't do anything wrong, right? What do I do? When do I just follow the law? And when do I go beyond the letter of the law and understand that really it's these random or not so random acts of kindness that actually change the world? Shavuot is not enough if it's just about law. It needs to also be about moving beyond the letter of the law. And for me, really, and I hope for you, it raises the question, we're in a really difficult moment in our country's life, in our own personal lives. You know, who am I in the story, and what risks am I willing to take, and how much I am willing to go beyond what is required of me in order to try to make a difference. So, do we have more time or we should stop? Okay, I want to conclude then with the next page. What I would have wanted to do if we had more time, and I encourage you to do this, is to look at this Crossroads text by the poet Merle Feld. Everybody see that? Yes, is it there? What happens when people stand at a crossroads? Naomi, Ruth, Orpah, Boaz, Laura. How do you find your true path in the world? What role does love play in charting the course? How do unforeseen consequences unfold from choices we make and the relationships we enter into? And how are our characters forged by the ways in which we improvise responses to what fate throws our way? How do we mediate the boundaries between ourselves and those we choose to care for, those we are obligated to care for? How do we emerge from loss and mourning? How do our experiences with death, with the loss of those we have loved, force us to recreate ourselves? So if we had more time, I would have sent you into small chevruta with a person and asked you to think about a moment in your life when you stood at a crossroads, why you made the decision you made, and what difference it made in your life. And as Nancy described, that this is partly coming to, this evening is happening because of loving a particular woman. How does the loss of this good friend to your community, how has it enabled you as a congregation to recreate yourselves? So that's where I should stop, but I have two poems I'm going to read. So with the permission. This is my favorite poem, The Book of Naomi and Ruth by Marge Piercy. When you pick up the Tanakh and read the Book of Ruth, it's a shock how little it resembles memory. It's concerned with inheritance, lands, men's names, how women must wiggle and wobble to live. Yet women have kept it dear for the beloved elder who cherished Ruth more friend than daughter. Daughters leave. Ruth brought even the baby she made with Boaz home as a gift. Where you go, I will go too. Your people shall be my people. I will be a Jew for you. For what is yours I will love as I love you, O Naomi, my mother, my sister, my heart. Show me a woman who does not dream a double, heart's twin, a sister of the mind in whose ear she can whisper, whose hair she can braid as her life twists its pleasure and pain and shame. Show me a woman who does not hide in the locket of bone that deep eye beam of fiercely gentle love she had once from mother, daughter, sister, once like a warm moon that radiance aligned the tides of her blood into potent order. At this season of first fruits, we recall two travelers, co-conspirators, scavengers making do with leftovers and mill ends, whose friendship was stronger than fear, stronger than hunger, who walked together the road of shards, hands joined. And one more poem. This is from Naomi Shihab Nye, a Palestinian poet. Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness, how you ride and ride thinking the bus will never stop, the passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the threads of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes everywhere, then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. So my concluding blessing, may what we have learned from the book of Ruth, that it's kindness that we're looking for, to empower us to create communities that celebrate kindness for ourselves, for each other, and for the world. Chag Sameach.
So much, Rabbi Laura Geller. We learn from you, we continue to learn from you. And now what do Jews do? We eat. So please join us in the foyer for cheesecake
And other desserts. There's things there. If anybody's interested in buying Laura's book, Getting Better at Getting Older, it's in the lobby. Laura would be happy to sign it for you and arrange for you to have that. So get yourself some food. Chag Sameach. For those who want to join us tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., we'll be here for our Shavuot morning service and Yisker prayers.